just have to take a quick minute to thank our sponsors, Yellow Dog Paddle, Eddie Mackin's Rip and Lips Fishing Trips, Expeditions Fly Fishing LLC, NJFishing.com. Also, all of our supporters, Mike K's Guide Service, Psycho Jigs, Lip Glue, Signal 11, Nor'easter Hardcore Apparel, FC Fish Company, Toggy Time Jigs, and the Gambler Sports Fishing.
So I showed up there, and on my first cast, I think I had like a 22-inch fish.
Really?
Yeah. So that day, I think I ended up getting a triple limit. Like I think I had 10 or 11 keepers up to like 6 pounds. I think I had 2 fish over 6. So that obviously,
dude, you probably thought you stumbled onto like the magical gold mine of fluke fishing. Like that was your first time trying it.
Eddie Mackin's Rip and Lips Fishing Trips. We actually got a call today that some of the crappie and better pan fishing is starting up. Still ice on the lake, though, currently, but it will be navigatable very soon. Call Eddie if you want to book your trip on Lake Pacon. If you book it before April 1st, you save $50 on your trip. Also, the pontoon boat rentals will be back up and running, and the red-eye trips if you're fishing by yourself and want to jump on a boat, a couple other guys, make some new friends, those are available. Call Eddie Mackin's Rip and Lips Fishing Trips today for your Lake Pacon fishing trip. Guys, if you're on the computer, just check out njfishing.com. Jerry Zagorski, 27 years, is the #1 resource in freshwater and saltwater fishing in New Jersey. 100% free to register and gives you full access to the message boards. Check out njfishing.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 95 of the NJ Multi-Species Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Santiago. As always, my partner, Chris Pereira.
What's going on?
Tonight's guest, Roger I. Second time on here.
Yeah.
One of the highest viewed episodes we ever had that we talked about last week because surf fishing is so popular in New Jersey.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of salt water and a lot of people that don't have boats, I guess. And
I don't have a saltwater boat.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't either. I don't know. I think they're all seasick.
Do you think they all either get seasick or they're just terrible and can't make any friends?
Could be that, too.
Is this a good way to open up a surf fishing episode?
Probably not. Yeah, well, surf fishing are like a breed of their own, and they hate boat people. And it is what it is, whatever. They're very angry, though, for no reason.
Well, Roger ain't angry, and he likes us, and I think we should fish with him. I think we should surf fish with him.
He might be able to sway us. I mean, his videos and some of the stuff he does looks really cool. Before he comes on, over the weekend, we took an adventure to go for our first ever white crappie. I had to drive over 3 hours. We met up with the Kennedys. Chris, you want to tell the story?
I mean, I was thinking about this before and how lame it probably sounds to anyone else who's never really wanted to like check off all kinds of species off their list, but like we've never caught a white crappie. Like there just isn't really. They're here. They're up north. I've seen them in pictures caught. Guys have told me they've caught them up here, but I mean, I've caught thousands and thousands of crappie, right? I mean, over the years, I love fishing for crappie. I always fish for them in the spring through the ice. I've caught thousands of crappie. Not a single one of them, and I can tell a difference usually, Not a single one of them is white, to my knowledge, unless there was some weird one that kind of looked like a black one, and I didn't count the spines or something. But which kind of fits into the story later. But yeah, so to most people, I think this story is probably pretty lame. But we've never caught a white crappie. Chuck has caught a white crappie before, but he's awesome, and he just wanted to fish anyway. So he came and he actually drove us.
I don't think he ever caught one in New Jersey, though.
Oh, that's possible. Did he say that?
I think he did.
All right. Well, anyway, you already lied. You didn't drive 3 hours. You napped in the back of Chuck's truck for 2 of the hours. But
I wasn't asleep. I was awake.
Actually, you didn't nap as much as I thought you would, but you definitely fell asleep a couple times. But anyway, so we headed down there. You know, they told us, "Oh yeah, white crappie. That's we got tons of white crappie." So we head down there. The one thing I wish I did, I wish I walked into a deli and ordered a Taylor ham, egg, and cheese sandwich, but we didn't do that. But we
deep in enemy territory.
Yeah, we pull up and we randomly see Powerbait Paul fishing there.
I have a video reel of that. Yeah, Powerbait Paul was just in the bushes.
He's literally just there as we're driving over this bridge. I'm just like, dude, Powerbait Paul's standing right there fishing on the other side. And he comes running up to us with a freaking white crappie. Just comes running up to us holding a white crappie
in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Which was quite far from the water.
I'm like, well, dude, what are you doing? You're going to eat that? He's like, no, I got to get it back in the water.
And that one that he posted it in a story. He took a selfie with me in it, and he that was like one of the bigger fish of the day. That was like a larger white crappie, and it was pretty big compared to most of the ones that we caught, I would say.
Oh, it was hands down bigger than any white crappie that we caught.
I mean, we caught just for the record. Of course, I think Chuck caught a white crappie within the first 2 minutes.
He caught one pretty quick.
Ridiculous. And then me and you went like hours without one. And then I finally I took my worst cast of the day. That was like 2 feet from me, and it caught a white crappie.
Well, it turned, and like for anyone that doesn't know, and I've noticed this about, there's guys out there that like to bust on live bait fishing. And I got to say, the one thing I've noticed over the years is pretty much all the best fishermen in New Jersey that I know that are multi-species guys, they all use live bait. Even if they may not talk about it, trust me, they're using live bait sometimes. When it's the best option, they're using it.
Yeah.
And anyway,
usually in their pictures, you could always spot like a bait bucket with an aerator somewhere on the boat, or
some guys like to hide it, like they're embarrassed of it. I don't understand that. It's kind of weird, but yeah.
Listen, somebody just sent us an email that I responded to, and he said, "Oh, I watched a video online of you guys crappie fishing on Spruce Run, or Lake Apacon, one of the 2 lakes." And I told him, "Yeah." And he asked like which lake, and I said, "Well, we fish both of them." But I told him, I remember specifically that day, we were doing nothing with lures. And we always usually do crappie fish with lures. We're catching nothing. And you just randomly had shiners on board that were left over from like days before.
Yeah.
And we murdered them on those shiners, giant slab. That was one. It was just great. That's why he was emailing us, because it was such a great crappie trip. But if we wouldn't have had those shiners, it might have not turned out that way.
Right. And a lot of these lures guys are stubborn, and I've gone, I don't know about you, but I've gone through phases. And when I first started fishing, I started with bait. Then I used lures for a couple of things, started learning how to use them, right? You have a couple of really good days. I've gone through phases where I'm like, oh, I don't need live bait for anything. I just use lures. And then you have a day like that, right, where let's say we didn't have any live bait and we're fishing with lures, fishing with jigs. We try a couple of jigs. Maybe there's some kind of color or some kind of lure or jig that they would have hit that day, but you can only try so many things while you're out there, right? So we would have run out of time and would have said, what would we have said? We would have said, well, the fish just weren't biting today. Like, well, full moon, the wind, something, the water temperature, the fish just weren't biting, right?
Yep.
The reality of it is, if you don't have live bait with you in a situation like that, you didn't try everything. You may not have had what was going to work. And I've seen it enough times to know that I'm going to defend the fact that I'll use live bait anytime that I think it's going to be needed or make the fishing better. I got no problem with that. And you
have to, I mean, not everyone, but I work Monday through Friday. And then probably one of the weekend days, if not both, the kids are going to have sports. I only get one day off maybe to go fishing. I'm using the best thing possible. I'm not going to, handicap myself because someone else's opinion. It's just one of the most ridiculous things. I don't even want to start it because it's not.
Don't. Let me get back to the story. This fits into the story, right? Because Chuck went out of his way and bought all this live bait because he's fished much longer than us.
Yeah, we were not bringing live bait.
I wouldn't have brought live bait.
Me neither.
I wouldn't have brought it just because it was kind of an inconvenience.
Yep.
And I didn't think we would need it. Usually you don't.
Having to pick up live bait's one of the biggest pain in the asses in the world.
Right. So anyway, Chuck had it. That's what he caught his white crappie on. You abandoned the lures and switched to live bait and got your white crappie. Now, I was still using lures for a while, and I was catching tons of black crappie, plenty of black crappie. That's why I didn't switch. I couldn't imagine, and I still can't. I still don't think. I think it was just a coincidence that the white crappie hit the live bait, to be honest with you. But anyway, the funny part of this story, not to make it last too much longer, is so you got yours. Chuck already had one, and he was the one that cared the least about it. He just wanted to catch fish. He didn't care what it was. He was catching sunnies at one point for like 2 hours and having a blast. I still needed a white crappie. I'm like, I can't believe it came all the way down here. I need to check a white crappie off my list. You went up to the truck. You were done. You had yours. You were tired. You went to go take a nap in the truck. I went to the other side of the bridge, or maybe this was a little bit after that. I went to the other side of the bridge about 1 o'clock because I thought I could get a better cast angle. And first cast, I catch one that for a second I thought was a white crappie, but it was really small. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, nah, maybe not. It looks kind of, you couldn't really tell. I'm like, I took a picture of it with my phone. I'm like, and I let it go and I kept fishing. I'm looking at the picture and I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. I completely forgot that the white crappie and the black crappie have a different number of spines on the dorsal fin. Just for some reason, just completely forgot it. Because it's been so long since I even thought about trying to catch a white crappie. So we keep fishing now. And Chuck's like, we're not leaving till you catch one. Come on, don't give up. We're not leaving. And he's the one that drove. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to give up. If you don't want to leave, then we're going to keep going. We stayed there till 4:30, I believe. So from 1 to 4:30. And then for some reason, when we're driving back, I go, wait, there's a way to tell the difference other than the pattern and the shape of the body. And I look it up to confirm. The white crappie has 5 or 6 spines on the dorsal fin. The black crappie has 7 or 8 spines on the dorsal fin. So I zoom in on the picture, and the damn thing's got 6 spines as a fucking white crappie.
And the thing that's most mind-boggling is like there was a couple fish in the day that were kind of like borderline confusing, but that one, when you showed me the picture of it, I was like, it looked like a white crappie immediately because the gill plate kind of looked.
You think so?
The gill plate, if you want to pop the picture up, maybe we could pop a black and white one up here, but I think the gill plate on a white crappie looked a lot longer. I think they definitely fought harder too. We caught like hundreds of black crappie.
It was just so small, dude, that like, and I was like, look at, they got a little bit of different, like a elongated body shape, kind of like in the head and the tail, but it was too small to have.
The tail. Half its tail was gone.
And then it had, the medium size, the regular size white ones had like that different pattern with kind of like the dots in a stripe. And this one really didn't have that yet either, I guess, because it was so small. So whatever, mission accomplished, but we stayed in deep South Jersey for 3.5 hours longer than we had to.
It was fun.
So
I had a fun trip, and it was something to do.
It was blast. The Kennedys
Not
are
that
awesome. It was nice to meet them in person, fish with them, power bait Paul too. So
Yeah, I think we have Roger ready to come in. Deuce, you ready to bring in Roger? Expeditions Fly Fishing, Joey X, brand new business in New York State, servicing the Delaware River. Also, will service the Beaver Kill, Will Weemac, some of the littler streams on in waders, but has the beautiful drift boat for the East Branch and West Branch. If you want to book a spring trout fishing trip with Joey X in the drift boat, now's your chance. If you do book a single man trip, he will give you $25 off. And if you book a double man trip, he'll give you $50 off. So if you're looking to do that spring trout trip in a drift boat in New York with a fly rod, call Expeditions Fly Fishing, Joey X. Okay, so we are ready to bring our guest in, Mr. Roger I from episode 59, our second highest viewed episode ever behind Ted Nugent. Roger, welcome back to the NJ Multi-Species podcast.
Thank you.
what's going on, Roger?
Roger,
Joe, you forgot to introduce the channel.
I'm going to say it's catching and cooking.
Wow.
All right, never mind. Roger, you introduce your own channel.
Fishing and cooking.
No.
Yeah.
It is, right?
Did you get it?
It's very close. No, it's cooking and fishing.
Damn it.
Oh, we knew Joe was going to fuck up the introduction, but
you didn't know what it was either. Damn it.
I'm too busy laughing at you. What's going on, Roger?
Not much. How's everyone doing?
We're doing good. We're done ice fishing, and I'm sure you don't ice fish, right? So you're happy as hell.
I do not. Although I didn't mind the ice season just because I had so much to do, just to catch up. If it was like last year, open water, January, February, I would have been fishing like every chance I got. Probably got nothing done. So yeah, but you guys had a good season.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, we always tell everyone that. I don't know if you've ever ice fished or if you have no interest at all, but if you have interest in it, we're always, if next year we get a good ice season again, anyone's we try to get whoever wants to come out. It doesn't always work out. We were supposed to take a couple other guys out, and the schedules never really worked out. But if you have any interest next year, whatever, just hit us up.
For sure, yeah.
You don't really need any of your own stuff.
Yeah, I actually have an ice rod that I bought years ago, and I almost went a couple of times, but then I was like,
Well, it can be scary, but I promise you, we're crazy, me especially. But I'm not going to invite people onto like those trips.
Right.
By the time, if I say you can come, we've already confirmed that it's good.
Right. No, it's interesting because a lot of my freshwater fishing is very similar to like ice fishing. Like I do a lot of stuff off 2D, as I know you do as well. So I'm pretty, like I think it could be very fun. Like I watch enough of it on YouTube. So.
Oh yeah, all right. If you've been watching it on YouTube, thinking about it, then you're ready to try it next year
for sure.
Roger, I have to ask right off the bat. As I said before, it's episode 95. You were the second highest viewed episode we've ever had. Why is it that surf fishing stuff, and especially yours, does so well in the state of New Jersey? Surf fishing content in itself seems to just be unbelievably popular.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the most accessible, right? And then especially Fluke. So my channel recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, mainly focused on fluke fishing from shore. And, just the fact that you don't need a boat, and fluke are here during the good weather months. So you don't need to be out there in the cold, and like tog fishing is popular, but that's they have to deal with crabs and cold weather, stripers obviously. Fluke you can kind of spread out they're pretty much everywhere. Although last year was sort of a strange season. You kind of had to find the pockets of more quality fish. But for the most part, you can go to any piece of saltwater in this, late spring, summer, into early fall and catch fluke. So,
and I gotta say, I mean, I don't know how you've created / not invented, but you maybe modified / perfected a lot of these techniques and stuff. I'm not really sure how to word it. You can tell me more, because I don't know what kinds of pieces you've pulled from other things. But my point is, it's a pretty unique type of fishing for fluke, because when normally you ask someone if you want to go fluke fishing, like if someone asked me if I want to go fluke fishing a couple years back before I saw your channel and stuff like that, I would immediately think, okay, we're going to go on a boat, we're going to have a jigs and stuff, and we're going to drift and drop it down, and we're going to work the jigs as we drift. We're not going to cast out plugs. We're not going to cast out jigs. Or you could, you cast, but you're drifting and kind of working it with the current. I wouldn't immediately go to even shore fishing in general. It's kind of one of those fish where, at least until a couple of years ago, more so, guys immediately go to, like, they're fishing on a boat. It's not really this fish that you can consistently successfully target from shore. But you can.
No, yeah, you definitely can. And I think, like you said, traditionally people shore fish for fluke, but I don't think people put in the amount of effort to consistently catch limits from shore. And that's really, if you do have to cover some ground most of the season, like there are times when they're pretty concentrated. But yeah, if you have the right technique, like I said, I think on our last podcast, I sort of just looked at fluke as a largemouth or smallmouth bass. And that's the way I kind of approach it. They're very aggressive fish. And, as long as your presentation is within their strike zone, 6 inches to 2 or 3 feet off the bottom, you have a shot at catching fluke pretty much with any kind of presentation. There are some that are much more productive than others. Gulp is just one of those baits that, if your goal is just to catch fluke, that's really what you should be using most of the time. But yeah, it's been a process of refining different techniques. So with the jigs is, I've used 1/8 all the way to 3/4 ounce, different jig heads, different gulp profiles over the years. And I just care about results. So, at the end of the day, my channel, the philosophy is basically, just show people the results of whatever process I went through to refine this or that technique.
You may have answered this last time about the fishing with the jigs your way, not a jig from a boat drifting and working it the traditional way. Do you ever tip it with any kind of bait or scent other than the gulp plastic that's on there? No, I didn't think so.
Yeah, because if you tip it with something, it kind of changes the action. Like we're only using a 1/4 ounce jig head.
Yeah.
And now, for the most part, the 6-inch jerk shad. It's a very streamlined kind of package. And you want to be able to generate that speed. And, speed is a big trigger for all kinds of fish. So if you were to tip it with a meat strip or something like that, you would just slow it down. And it's really not necessary. Gulp is pretty powerful, and they really do respond to it.
And then obviously one of the ways to surf fish that's pretty popular, just probably because it's relaxing, is guys will throw out bait and sit and wait. But when it comes to fluke being like a total ambush predator, you're really not being effective doing
No,
that.
not at all. Like you need to cover water. You know, these are not fish that will come to you. You could park yourself in front of like prime structure, you know, say the side of a jetty, but even that, you make 10 or 15 casts, it's probably going to dry up.
Yeah.
So if you're serious about trying to catch a limit from shore or multiple limits, you do have to cover ground. And everything from the way you pack and how much water you bring in the summer, like that all plays, you know, my average trip would be probably 3 miles. You know, sometimes I'll do 5, 6, 7. But yeah, if I have 2 or 3 hours, then I'm going to cover some beach.
Now, can I ask, how crazy do you drive yourself when it comes to picking between the size or the color? Like if you're presenting a gulp and you're not really doing that well, will you just stay with the same gulp and change the color, or will you go to completely different shape and color?
No, I mean, so those are all things that I've experimented with in the past. Now, if I'm not getting bit, the first thing I'll change is how I'm jigging. So I will either
Action.
Right. So I will either get more aggressive with my pops, or I will put more line tension on the fall and let it fall a little bit slower. It's very rare that I'll go to a different size jig head. If it's dead calm and I'm fishing very shallow flats, I might go to 1/8. But for the most part, that 1/4 ounce and the 6-inch jerk shad is pretty much all you need. Now, in terms of color, I think 90% of what I throw now is white.
Really?
Yeah. I just, and it's not really the color, it's the consistency and texture of that white gulp.
Wow.
In the 6-inch jerk shad. That's like very optimal. A lot of other colors are either too soft or too stiff.
You're saying the actual plastic of that color is different?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
really?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I've thought that before and always just kind of thought like, oh, it's probably just an older pack or something. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, no, there's some that are very soft, like Pink Shine is usually pretty soft.
Yeah.
Some are too stiff. So I would rather, like most people want gulp that lasts a long time on the hook, so they don't mind a stiffer, harder gulp. I'm sort of the opposite. I want that kind of suppleness. And when you're jigging, there's a lot of micro movements to your bait. So you look at a jerk shad, it's perfectly straight and it doesn't have that kicking curly tail like a grub but there's a lot of movement to that tail if the bait is soft enough. And especially when you're popping it off a slack line and it kind of, you know, like explodes off the bottom. If you slow down that footage, like in my jigging lesson, I have underwater footage. And if you slow it down, you'll see that tail kick.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of movement to that bait.
Yeah, it's just like a fluke bait that you would use for largemouth bass or whatever.
Yeah.
When you can actually walk the dog, that thing will kick back and forth, and that tail will whip back.
Yes, if you rig it weedless, now the gulp baits weedless not great because you know they don't have the right kind of texture for it, but you could walk like, so there's 2 main jigging methods that I use, and one is a very methodical, like I'll pop it off the bottom and then I'll swing it on a tight line. And that's what I normally start off with if I'm fishing a beach, like a gently sloping beach. That's how I'm jigging. And for the most part, that gets the job done. If I'm fishing deeper water, then I will pop 3, 4, 6 times on slack, like sort of snap jigging. And then I will let it fall like straight down on complete slack line. So those are the methods that I play around with first. And when you're popping it on slack line, if you tie a little loop knot, that jig will actually walk left and right. And if you want to accentuate that action, you can use a darter head instead of a 90-degree ball head. And and that thing will glide like 2-3 feet to the right and then left. It's pretty cool. You could do a lot with that profile. So,
and you're basically using the lightest possible, pretty much.
No,
the lightest you can get away with.
Yeah, so 1/4 ounce is a good weight to use because you get decent casting distance. So if you go down to 1/8 ounce, it will slow your fall rate. But if it's windy, like you can't really punch through the wind with a 1/8 ounce jig head. And also, so one rule is for any kind of fishing, I think, is you want to fish the fastest presentation that still gets bit, right? Especially if you're covering water. So you can fish a 1/4 ounce jig head a lot faster than you can fish a 1/8 ounce. Because if you add up all the time you're waiting for that jig to fall, in terms of the weight difference. And, but if you go over a 1/4 ounce, especially from the beach, you start having a hard time getting it off the bottom. And you lose that crisp, height off the bottom as you do with the 1/4 ounce. So 1/4 ounce is really where it's at as far as I'm concerned. There are some situations I'll go heavier, like if I'm fishing an inlet, if there's a lot of current. Sometimes you want to go heavier just to get a better falling rate, like a faster rate of fall, and you get some reaction strikes that way. 99% of the time, 1/4 ounce is it.
Now, what are you when you're planning a day? You're going out for the day fishing. Where we always have like this thing in our head, the prime time. It's usually sunrise or sunset. When you're going out surf fishing, I know there's so many variables with the tides. Is there a certain tide that you're like, oh, that's the time to be there? I got to be there for that tide.
Yeah, tide is most important early in the season when you're fishing the back bays and rivers. That's when you get like a 2 or 3 degree temperature swing between low and high tide. And that could make a big difference. First 2 to 3 weeks. Once you're fishing out front in the surf, in my opinion, tide doesn't matter as much. And tide is also very location, like it really depends on where you are. Some sections of beach, they'll bite better on the outgoing, some on the incoming. But the important thing is they might shut off during dead water, but they will kind of reposition themselves, but they generally don't go very far. So if you're catching fish on the incoming and you lose that bite at slack tide, you can generally find it at the start of the outgoing, as long as you're willing to move around a little bit.
You have to move.
Yeah.
And you're primarily wearing waders when you go?
Just shorts, Crocs.
Just shorts.
Yeah.
But you go into the water?
I do. Yeah. I mean, most places you don't have to go in very deep.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it really depends on where you're fishing. Like if you're fishing the northern Jersey beaches, you don't have to go in very deep at all. Sometimes in the south, like south of Island Beach, OBI, those beaches are a lot flatter.
Yeah, so the shallows go out much further.
Wildwood, you could walk like a mile out.
Nobody's fluke fishing in the surf at Wildwood. You got to walk 2 miles to get to the freaking deep water.
Right.
Rogers. So I was looking at your channel again. You sent us this. You have new lessons up on the channel now. Joe, did you get a chance to look at it or no? I sent it to you.
Oh, all right, I have it though.
I didn't have time to sit through the entire thing in its entirety, obviously, yet, but I did look at some of it, and just like the first one with the jig for the Fluke, this one is now, interestingly enough, there's no gulp involved in this. You're just using stick baits, jerk baits, crank baits, whatever you want to call them. And there's no bait involved at all, not even gulp. And just like your other lessons, the coolest part to me is this like scientific, mathematical, like physics type approach to everything that you're explaining, showing. And I mean, you've got underwater video of the Lord working, fish being caught. You've got diagrams on there explaining what is happening, what you're doing, what you're trying to do, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just so cool. It's just this in-depth approach to this tactic. And now even more so than the other one, when you're using gulp, now there's no gulp involved at all. And that's really out of the box. To me, at least. I don't know. Maybe I missed something along the way, but you don't really hear guys in the past using stick baits, jerk baits,
crank baits. How did you come up with that? Like, it'd be the last thing I would ever put on if I was surf fishing for Fluke, like jerk bait. Like,
was it an accident? Like, how'd this happen?
No, I mean, I went out there. This got to be three years ago now. I went out there with 3 or 4 jerk baits that are productive for me in freshwater with the intention of catching Fluke. And I think I mentioned this.
Was it just kind of like, oh, I think it'd be cool to do it? Or like, what was the thought process? Did you think it would be like it would work really well in certain situations? Or you just thought
No, I really thought if I can dial in the right jerk baits, because there's like 1,000.
Yeah.
And if I can get the right action and pick the right time. So that was very important because I didn't show up to like an empty stretch of beach and I didn't know where, like I knew the Fluke were there and I knew they were biting. So, I mean, really, that's when you should experiment with any new technique, right?
That's when we should experiment, but that's when we don't because we just want to use what we know already works and catch the fish.
Right, exactly. I mean, you don't want to go searching for Fluke with like a brand new technique or searching for anything really. So I showed up there and on my first cast, I think I had like a 22-inch fish.
Really?
So that day, I think I ended up getting a triple limit. Like I think I had 10 or 11 keepers up to like 6 pounds. I think I had 2 fish over 6. So that obviously,
dude, you probably thought you stumbled on like the magical gold mine of Fluke fishing. That was your first time trying it.
Yeah, that's the first time. I mean, again, like I knew the fish were there and I had sort of a control because my cousin was fishing next to me that day. And he ended up catching, this is on my channel, he had 31 keepers in that tide.
What?
So
with the jig method that you did.
Yes.
Okay.
With the single jig. So what happened was, like we were pretty much neck and neck, like one, like I'll catch 2, he'll catch 1, vice versa for like, I think it was the last 2 hours of the incoming. And then once the tide switched, the water dirtied up and the jerkbait bite went down like by 80%. But he kept catching on the gulp, which kind of makes sense. Yeah. But what ended up happening was, after that day, I wanted to catch every Fluke on a jerkbait. So the next year, I started, opening weekend. I was out there throwing the jerkbait. And it is pretty like time and location specific to some degree. But then at the same time, I refine the jerkbait selection. So the jerkbaits that I started off with, that you'll see in like the first 2 or 3 videos on my YouTube channel, they're not really the jerkbaits I use today. So now,
okay.
Yeah. So those jerkbaits are I should have a couple here. I'll just show you guys real quick. But some of the earlier jerk baits they dive a little bit shallower, and they're the baits that I use most in freshwater, like Division 110. This one, that's a Duo. Yeah, can you guys see that?
Yeah, if you hold it in front of your face, I can see.
Yeah, so that's the Duo 120, and you see it. It has a pretty shallow bill.
Can you change out the trebles for singles? Or
on these, I do. Yeah. So that's the Jackal re-range. That's the 110. And
do you get a better action when you change the trebles out, or you just want it easier to unhook them?
Yeah, easier to unhook on the singles. Although even that, like hook selection is a big deal, because so basically what I found is like all these freshwater jerk baits, the goal in freshwater is to have them suspend. Right. Like you want them to sit there without floating or sinking. Although nowadays there's a lot of sinking jerk baits because of live scope. But in any case, the traditional jerk bait approach is to have it just sit in the middle of the water column and just stay there.
Yeah.
That's not really what you want for fluke. So for fluke, you want a floating jerk bait. And you want a jerk bait, so you want a jerk bait that has like a moderate rate of float. For me to modify these baits to do that, I have to put singles or smaller trebles on. So I basically have to lighten them up.
Okay.
Yeah. So then basically what I found out is instead of like those jerk baits that dive maybe 5 to 6 feet, I want something that dives 8 to 9 feet but has a faster float rate, and then I can cover deeper water into shallow water, because when you're casting from shore, you're always retrieving deep into shallow, and in order for you to cover that slope effectively, you want a jerkbait that can sort of walk upslope, so when you pause, it will float up, and then you jerk it or twitch it, it'll go deeper. But with your rod tip angle, like if you angle your rod tip up and you flutter the jerk bait upwards, the bait won't actually go up, but it'll go flat. So it won't dive. It'll just kind of go flat. And then it hits that slope and you let it float, and then you just kind of walk it all the way to your feet. And that is...
You just kind of adjust it as you go, obviously, the closer you get to yourself.
Right. Exactly. So that, so that whole process is covered, I believe, in the first video of the jerkbait lesson. And then, like depth control is a big deal, right? Because the fluke, they're not going to come more than 3 or 4 feet off the bottom most of the time. So you want to be in that zone. But you also don't want your jerkbait to be digging into the sand the entire time. Right,
well,
because
what if you want to try to snag a fluke out of the sand?
Yeah, I've been accused of that, because sometimes because you'll catch a fish, like they'll be hooked on just the tail treble, and then the front will swing around and catch a gill, like top of the head or something. People will be like, "Oh, like you snagged that fish." It's like, dude. You're not snagging a fluke. I mean,
I would be more impressed if you were able to drive your crankbait into the sand at that angle, snagging fluke out of the sand. I'd be more impressed than if you get it to bite.
No, that would be amazing.
Yellow Dog Paddle is offering a ton of new stuff on their website. Go to their website and check it out. They're now offering almost a type of frequent flyer pass, great for retired people. Gives you up to 3, 4, 5 trips per year. You can go at all different times, so you can see different seasons. Also offering fishing lessons for people that want to buy their own boat and want to set that trolling spread up but don't know how. He'll take you out, show you how to set up everything. And also, starting his trolling trips on Round Valley very soon. So call Yellow Dog Paddle today and check out their website for a ton of new available stuff for the 2025 season.
But Yeah, that's basically, and just to close the loop a little bit. So this is the kind of profile that I'm using more these days. So you see, like the lip, right? Much larger lip,
much,
but at the same time,
diver.
Right, it's a deeper diver, but more importantly, it dives at a steeper angle.
Yeah.
So for the same distance, like this bait is stabbing into the bottom like 2 or 3 more times than the shallower baits. So like the shallower jerk baits will travel probably say 2 feet to dive 1 feet, whereas this will go 1 and 1. The more opportunities you can get that bait into their face and then have it slowly float away, the more bites you're going to end up getting. And that's really the key to jerkbait.
It's almost like, now that I'm thinking about it and picturing it, and I'm thinking about the diagrams that I saw in part of your lesson there, it's almost like a reverse action of the jig.
Exactly.
When you're doing the jigging technique, you got that snap coming up.
Exactly.
Now, when you do it, that snap's coming down, and then it slowly floats up. It's like the reverse.
Exactly, and that's what I find so fascinating about jerkbaits and crankbaits to some degree. But like I will use lipless crankbaits quite a bit. Not as much anymore, because at the end of the day, that's just a jig. That's something that sinks, right? Like when you give it no input, it just sinks.
Right.
Whereas with the jerkbait, at least a floating jerkbait, it floats. So it's exactly reversed. A fluke doesn't often see something that comes into their face and then slowly floats away. That's really the trigger. And I've had fluke come up all the way to the surface to eat a jerkbait that's like floating up.
Like it floats all the way, gets to the surface, and they'll take it right off the surface?
Yeah, they'll take it right before it gets to the surface.
Okay.
What's the highest you've ever seen one come off the bottom?
Okay, so like I said, when I was using those shallower jerkbaits, like the re-range and the duo, I know for a fact that I was casting into 13, 14 feet of water, because I also kayak fished that whole area.
Okay.
And those baits only dive 5 feet. And I was catching fish right over 13, 14 feet. So that was like peak activity. And
Joe,
they were
do
willing,
that math real quick.
It's like 7 feet.
Like 8, 9, 10 feet. Yeah.
Shit.
They will come up very far if you have the right conditions. But like I said, for the most part, they're not going to do that. So that's why I spent so much time in the jerkbait lesson going over ways to index your bait. Like you need to know where that bait is in relation to the bottom. And that's how you catch fluke on the jerkbait throughout the entire season. Like not just when they're so fired up on bait that they're willing to chase anything down. Like you can actually walk down the beach with the jerkbait and methodically cover almost as much ground as you can cover with a jig. I mean, a jig will always be more efficient because you can cast a jig into 30 feet and you're fishing 30 feet because it'll sink.
Right.
I mean, a jerkbait is limited by how deep it can dive, but once it gets into that zone, say you're fishing a 9-foot diving jerkbait, you can start fishing when the jerkbait gets to maybe 11 feet. Like that zone of the bottom all the way back to your feet is fishable. So,
and if someone hasn't kayaked the water that they want to fish, I mean, obviously, if they know they're using a 9-foot diving crankbait and they crank it down as far as they can and they never feel bottom, they know it's deeper than 9 foot, but they don't necessarily know how deep it could be. 15, it could be 20, whatever.
Yeah.
What would your advice be basically if you're using that? Would you go to a deeper one to try to just keep trying to get deeper and deeper till you can hit the bottom, or do you just fish it and see if you get hit? And
well, All right. Here's another one I can demo. This is probably the deepest jerkbait I use to catch fluke. Let's see that.
Okay.
All right. So this is the Duo 100 DR. This thing will get to like 13 feet on like braid to leader. The problem with this bait is it dives pretty much like this,
straight
like
down.
Almost perfectly vertical.
Wow.
So if you're fishing like a sloping beach, it starts digging into the sand very quickly, no matter how fast it floats, right? So a bait like that is really for marinas and docks, certain inlets and stuff like that. For the most part, to answer your question, if you're fishing a beach, at some point your bill is going to come into contact with the bottom.
Right.
Right. So whatever jerkbait you're using, you basically cast it out, you reel until you make bottom contact. And this is one of the most important things I cover in the lesson. You need to keep the number of handle rotations in your head.
Okay.
So if it takes you 25 rotations to hit bottom, you don't need to waste time fishing, like working the jerkbait after 10 handle rotation because you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. So then, 25 handle rotations, you hit bottom for that little section of beach, you can start fishing it after 20 handle rotations.
So, because basically in this scenario, you're targeting fluke, you're really not fishing, like you're not targeting them that first whatever amount of feet in that cast anyway.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to cut that out.
Right. Well, the other thing is it takes time for the jerkbait. It takes distance for the jerkbait to dive to its maximum depth.
Right.
Anyway, so really, the freshwater jerkbait stuff is almost entirely from boats or kayaks. Like almost no one fishes a jerkbait from shore because it's not really designed to do that.
I was gonna bring that up. I'm like, I would never do this on a lake. Like you'd immediately every cast within seconds just slam your jerkbait into a glob of algae or something.
Yeah, it's just as a tangent. I was at a lake today that's all rocks, and normally I would catch them cranking, but I had zero fish crankbaiting. But I was, then I tied on a jerkbait that floated. I mean, I think the float rate was like 1 inch per second. It's barely floating. And I would get that thing to touch the rocks and then flutter it upwards, count to like 10, and then give it another really light flutter upwards. And that's how those fish wanted it today. Just like a jerkbait that's kind of smashing itself into the rocks, but very lightly. And that's kind of how you do your jerkbait fishing for fluke, because from shore, the diving angle of any jerkbait or plug is sort of the reverse of the bottom. Like the bottom is coming up, but then your bait wants to keep diving deeper. Now, if you're on a boat casting to shore, then your dive angle matches the bottom contour.
Right.
Right. So that makes more sense. And that's another reason why you need to modify these jerkbaits so that they float. If you have one that suspends, it's going to take you 10 minutes and you're not going to be in that zone. You want to be above those fish.
Let me ask you one more thing now. So you're using these jerkbaits to target the fluke. It's super fun. It's cool. You probably get some awesome strikes on it, just like a jerkbait in freshwater, like a smallmouth or something, right? But when at what time is it better to use the jerkbait? You get what I'm saying? Like when you're probably going with both a jig and a jerkbait, but when do you decide which one you're going to, like, when are you going to choose the jerkbait over the jig, other than the obvious that if it's working better,
right?
Like what are you thinking in your head before you go there of what you're going to use?
I mean, there's two answers. So my my answer for myself is when I feel like catching a fish on a jerkbait, then I'll use a jerkbait. But for most people, what I recommend is you use the single jig and gulp as your baseline. So you need to know that there are fish around. That is still to this day the best way to figure that part out. And then I would imagine most people go out fluking. They want to catch 1 or 2 keepers for dinner. So after you've done that with the jig and gulp, then you take out your jerk baits that you happen to bring, and then you see what you can do with it. I mean, it's the good thing about most of the jerk baits that I recommend is you can fish them on the same equipment, rod, line, reel that I recommend for single jigging. They're all basically, 6'10" to 7'6" medium light freshwater rods. 2,500 reels, light braid like PE1 braid, which is like US braid, like 8-pound braid to like 10 or 12-pound leader. And then you're good to go. So you don't need like a special jerkbait rod or anything like that, especially for fluke. In freshwater with fish that jump, I think is a little bit different. But fluke, okay, so your landing percentage with jerkbaits or any treble hook baits, they're not going to be as high as a jig, especially if you have the hook set on a jig already dialed in.
Yeah.
But it can be pretty high if you set your drag accordingly and you have the right rod angle. It's like you can't horse in a jerkbait fluke. Like you kind of have to fight them. And you have to wait for the right set of waves to bring the fish in, that kind of stuff.
I did see some of your fights. It looked like, I mean, they were big fish, but it did look like they were giving you a kind of a different type of better fight almost.
Yeah, like half of those fish, if I were fishing a jig, like a big jig hook, they would be on the beach like 20% into those, But small treble hooks or single hooks, you don't have any control over how they eat your jerk bait. Right. So, you like, unless you can see that they have both sets of hooks firmly inside their jaw, you kind of have to play them.
And it's kind of it's just the shape of their bodies and their heads and their mouths, obviously. And fluke are notorious for having this weird fight. I would call them like it's like a magic carpet ride, because it just, especially when you get them next to the boat, that's the worst. When you see a big one home next to the boat and the guy's not ready, your buddy's not ready with the net. Oh God.
Yeah, we talked about this last time. Like fluke at boat side is the scariest fish. Like I would rather slide them onto the beach than have to net them. I mean, because they can be completely docile coming up from 80 feet or whatever, and then completely flip out.
And it's almost like they can swim in any direction just by flopping their body. Can they swim backwards? Like legitimately?
They can swim backwards at full speed.
Wow.
Like they don't just swim backwards. Like they can start. So the thing is, for people fishing from a boat, party boat, kayak, you just can't let the fish break surface. That's the number one rule. And the other rule is you don't let them stall. So a lot of times, like the fluke will be coming, like they'll be coming up off the bottom and you're reeling. And then all of a sudden you just stop because the net man's not ready. That's the worst thing you can do, because that fluke is sort of lulled into sleep, just coming up. So what you want is, while they're still 3 to 5 feet underneath the surface, if you're waiting for the net, you want to start doing figure eights.
Yeah.
But you want to make your figure eights very smooth, like no sudden turns, just like keep them in the water and keep them going in like a forward kind of momentum until the guy has a net in the water. So
hey, that's one of the best things about surf fishing. You just go bring it right on the sand. You don't need a net. You don't have to worry.
Drag it right up.
Yeah, I mean that has its own set of challenges, but at least you're not watching your fluke just like swim off into the deep when your net man knocks your jig out of his fucking mouth.
Oh God.
So,
I ain't fishing with that guy anymore.
For anyone that's watching this that's interested in getting this into more detailed your online lessons, what's the easiest way to find them and get on your channel?
yeah, no. So the YouTube channel is Cooking and Fishing. There's a ton of jigs and there's all kinds of fluke content. The actual lesson is on my website, which is cookingandfishing.com. Okay. And it's up there along with the blaze. And then later this year, if everything goes right, I'll be coming out with my own fluke jerkbait. And yeah, because like right now
he's got to modify all these store-bought ones anyway. That's
the main thing. It's like I'm asking people to first go and buy a bait that I think most saltwater fishermen don't know what a jerkbait is. And so you're buying a bait and then you have to go buy the hooks, the split rings, and all this other crap. So I found a blank that works very well, that will take full size number 6. I haven't decided exactly on the hook sizes yet or the brand. Like I'm still testing like that stuff out, but the whole goal is that it'll be able to fish out of the box. It'll come with a decoy snap, decoy split rings, most likely decoy hooks. I'm a big fan of those hooks.
That's cool.
So yeah. So, hopefully I get that done. I mean, that whole project was a nightmare. Hopefully it's pretty smooth from here on out, but I have a guy painting them and this is just.
I'll buy one.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'll show you a prototype real quick. It's not a prototype. It's just something that I magic markered up.
Joe may never use it, but he'll definitely buy one.
Yeah, I will.
That one, so this one has these I think are BKK 62s and a size 6, but these are a little bit too heavy. So with the treble hooks, you're basically deciding between a heavier hook gauge so that you can pull on them harder, or a thinner hook gauge that has better penetration.
Yeah.
And for the most part, jerkbaits, I feel like you want better penetration because a lot of times they're not fully committing to that bite. They're just kind of slapping at it. And then you want round bend trebles that are thin enough, they don't have to apply much pressure.
Right. And then especially if you're using treble hooks and multiple hooks are hitting them at the same time when you go to set the hook, that's even more pressure that you would need if the hook is thicker.
Exactly. So, so these are the freshwater version of the decoys. These are, I think, the Y22s. And they're a lot thinner than the last one.
And only see one at a time, but you get the idea.
But you get the idea. They also affect the float rate. So then I have to play around with the hook sizes and, there's a million treble hooks out there. And the reason I went to trebles, I used to use all single hooks on all my plugs in freshwater and saltwater. And the reason is I wanted to do less harm to the fish. What I found is I end up deep hooking more fish with single hooks than I do with treble hooks.
On the plugs?
On the plugs, yeah.
Wow.
Huh.
So with smallmouth, I've caught, I lost count, but I basically ended up killing 2 smallies with small crankbaits that have 2 single hooks. And it's exactly the same way. They're able to get it deeper down their throat. The thing with treble hooks is, yes, obviously you get a lot more hooks on the outside of the body. Sometimes they'll go into their eye, which is terrible, but they tend to catch something on the way in. So it prevents them from getting it too deep. That's my theory anyway, because with Fluke, same exact way. Like if you look at one of my first jerkbait Fluke videos, I was using one of those jerkbaits with 3 hooks that I put 3 singles on, and one Fluke just had it all the way down his gullet. You know, because
that doesn't really happen when you got treble.
That hasn't happened once on any species of fish, even with number 8 trebles. Fishing for largemouth, like I had a largemouth that was pushing 6 pounds on like a Z2. It's a Megabass Z2. It's a tiny, 2 number 8 treble hooks, and I couldn't see the bait, but it was skin hook like sideways inside his throat, and that was the closest call that I had.
Huh.
And look, I'm sure if I catch enough over time, you're gonna get like a deeply hooked treble hook bait fish, but so far it hasn't happened.
And now that you mentioned it, because in a lot of trout spots you have to use single hooks, or I guess you could take one. You can use 3 hook points,
right?
Right. So if I'm using a plug, like if I'm using a small jerkbait for trout, I'm either gonna replace one of the trebles with a single and cut one of the trebles, the hook points off of one of the other trebles, so I have 3 total. But most of the time, I'm just replacing it with 2 single hooks anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like I don't think I've like had any of them swallow it into their throat, but I do feel like you get them deeper, like you said, versus maybe sometimes it swinging around, hitting them in the cheek or the eye, unfortunately, sometimes. But
yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I don't know how a trout feeds. Like
they usually come up from behind and snap at it.
But is it more of a, because I know, fluke, bass, they're more vacuum, like suction feeders. I think fluke is more of a combination. They're sort of like a walleye because they have teeth.
Yeah.
So they're not trying to fully vacuum it. So maybe like a half strength vacuum compared to a striper or a largemouth bass. But that action, like if you look at the slow motion, there's some guy, he put us some videos, but when the first thing that starts heading into their mouth are the hooks on a jerkbait. Because the jerkbait is just sitting there and they come up from underneath and they start vacuuming that bait in. The hooks swing into the mouth, right? So by the time the whole bait starts going in, if you only have single hooks, they can tuck up right against the body. And then there's no hook points exposed, pointed at the fish on the way in. Whereas if you have treble hooks, even if the treble is tucked against the body, you have at least at one point sticking out. That's just the only thing that makes sense to me.
That's an interesting theory.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes, and it does make sense.
And again, this only applies for my fishing, which is largemouth, smallmouth bass, and fluke. That's what I've noticed it on. Like, not that I killed many fluke or bass with single hooks, but I remember those because it's pretty rare, but they happen. Whereas with trebles, like it has yet to. Now, sometimes I'll get a fish that's hooked, one set of treble in the mouth, another one outside. Sometimes the trebles will kind of glue their mouth shut, which fucking sucks. But to me, those are flesh wounds, right? But once you nick a gill, then it's game over.
Yeah.
Like that's a dead fish, versus 1 out of 20 might be slightly mangled by your treble hooks. So until I see something different, that's kind of how I'm going to go. And also that's another reason, like this setup that I have on most of my baits prior is like this, just to maintain the float rate. So I have a number 2 single in the back, and this is a number 7, or actually that's a number 8 treble. And your hookup percentage is like 80%. Because a lot of times they'll come slap at this bait in the back and there's no hook point. sticking out either side. And then the belly hook is blocked a lot of times by the bill. Like that bill will bounce off the side of a fish's jaw, and you won't get them with that belly trouble. So ideally, from a hookup percentage perspective, I want 2 treble hooks on a bait that only has 2 hook hangers. That's really what, because I'm fishing for that big fluke that happens to see my jerkbait. That's the kind of thing that I want. But on most jerkbaits, you can't do it, because if I put 2 trebles here, this thing will barely float, and you want a certain float rate. And that's
why you're designing your own.
Yeah, that's the primary reason. Yeah,
that's cool.
Well, Roger, I mean, I have to thank you for taking the time to come back on here and talking to us. Hopefully, you'll be back again.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I messaged Chris months ago because I was triggered by watching some live scope fishing. And I was like, this is the end. And I want to come on and just rant and rave about that. But thankfully, you guys have enough guests lined up that, allow me to finish this jerkbait lesson. So I have something, actually people want to hear, to talk about, instead of me just ranting and raving about bullshit and freshwater fishing.
I couldn't get him on in time. And I actually said, so last episode where, we said you were coming on this week, I actually said, oh, we're not going to talk about fluke fishing this time, though. We're going to talk about some other stuff, because I thought he still wanted to rip into forward facing.
Yeah, no, there's no upside to it. It's here to stay. I just want people to know that if you were someone who struggled to catch fish, and then you got yourself a live scope, and now you're catching fish, just remember that. That's really all I want. Don't pretend that you all of a sudden gain some insight into fishing that you didn't have before. You just bought some technology. And I'm sure that stuff has a huge learning curve. Like the top guys are doing very specific things, but for the most part, it's not fishing. Up until live scope came out, our species have fished casting into the unknown, and now it's like you're calling your shots every single cast. You're seeing exactly what's happening. Yeah, but
we're gonna clip that and post it, and you're gonna get death threats from the back.
I know. Yeah, bring it.
My take on it is like I have a couple buddies who bought it to use it, for ice fishing and stuff, especially, and I've never gone fishing with them and said, holy shit, I got to buy this. It's great. It really leads to a lot more fish. I just haven't. And people think I'm crazy for saying it. And I'm like, well, look, most of the places you're fishing, if you already knew them because you fished them with, a regular sonar where the bottom, what's usually there, whatnot, you kind of know A, B, C, D, where the fish might be on any given day, right? They might be here at a spot A. Okay, they're not there, maybe. But so going there with the live scope and confirming that they're either there or they're not there, it's just kind of,
yeah. I mean,
it's a moot point to me.
I hear you, and that applies to bodies of water that you already know. But right. I'm not sure if you watched some of the ice fishing live scope stuff, because basically what you could do is you can drill one hole, put your transducer down, pan at 360, find the fish, walk off that distance, and your second hole is right on top of those fish.
See, now every time we tried that, when we drilled the hole, we scared all the fish away, and they went somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that's Jersey. Those fish are smarter than the Canadian fish I was watching. But
that's true.
But I was watching, and then some guy had their smart glasses on, like Google goggles or something, and then so while he's walking to the second hole to where to drill, he can see if those fish are still there because he has a link to his live scope unit that's like 50 feet back that way. I mean, just
dude, I still had a flip phone a couple of years ago. Like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah, I'm telling you, 2D. Like, people want to say, well, it's the same thing when side scan came out. No, there's all these excuses have to stop. All that stuff is historical sonar. Like, you're not seeing one fish and casting to it and seeing how it can interact with your bait. None of that.
In real time.
Yeah, in real time. So then not only do you not, I mean, just being able to keep a horizontal bait flat through the water takes like years. I mean, if you're counting down a spy bait or even like a little paddle tail and you want to keep it coming back to you at 12 feet that you counted down at, now you don't need to do any of that. You basically don't need to learn that skill anymore because you can see it on your screen. And if it sinks a little bit, you just reel a little faster. I mean, it's, anyway.
Well,
another episode.
I will.
There you go. It's a whole nother episode.
Well, no, in all seriousness, we do hope you'll come back, multiple times in the future. You're always welcome here. I know you don't fish for a ton of different species, but you ever want to come back on, talk about largemouth, smallmouth bass, or if you want to rant about something, I could try to get you on quicker before you get over it, which clearly you're not all the way over it yet.
I mean, this is me over it already. 2-3 months ago, I was like, man, this is anyway.
He literally wanted to do an entire episode just bashing forward facing. So
you let him cool off.
Yeah,
exactly.
I let him cool off.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we have to we can't keep him here all night. Roger, thank you so much. And we will have you back to let you bash live scope because we don't care.
And we're fishing with you.
We're coming.
I'm going to drag Joe's ass down to the beach whenever you say we can come.
Right.
And we're going to, we're always trying to get on our kayaks or our boats or someone's boat or a buddy's boat. We avoid the shore fishing because I don't know. There's just something in my head where I'm casting from the shore and I'm trapped there and I'm just like I'm like, oh, I wish I had a boat, then I could go over there or over there.
Yeah.
And instead
that's how I feel for most fishing. But with Fluke, I mean, last year wasn't the greatest season. Hopefully this year it picks up and then we'll just pick a day in the summer.
You will have the worst day of your life when we come with you.
Absolutely.
I can promise you that.
I doubt it.
Roger, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care, bud.
All right. Take care.
So that was Roger I for the second time. Awesome interview. Hopefully we really do need to go fishing with him because I'd like to learn actually in person and do that shit on my own.
Well, can you watch the video I sent you before you go at least?
I'll watch it and I'll be ready. Next week's guest, Joey X from Expeditions Fly Fishing. We're going to talk fly fishing, New York, Catskills, and Delaware River. This weekend is the Saltwater Expo. So if you're watching this, the show starts tonight. If you're going, have fun. I'll probably be there at some point. That's it. That's all I got.
I don't have anything. I'll be fishing probably instead of the Saltwater Expo, but I look forward to hearing about it.
Okay. Well,
take care and keep suffering for those fish, Joe, or whatever you do.